Good evening, everyone. Everybody ready to go already? Okay, good. Well, welcome and good evening as we, what's the date today? 25th. We got to be careful on the next booking. I'm gone. I'm in Vegas. Anybody want to come? No, I don't know. But I'm supposed to. We'll see what happens. So why don't we continue it from the last hearing? Apparently, we're going to try and do a little overview catch-up of some of the items. So why don't we'll turn it over to you, and we'll start with what your proposed aspects of. I see we have a letter here from. What's today's date? April 25th. Okay, go ahead, and we'll follow up with questions.
Not sure if this is working. Is it working?
Turn it on the back.
Red button. Just hold it.
Push it and hold it. Red button.
Young guy, huh? No?
We good? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark Bobrowski, I'm counsel for the applicant. We thought we would talk about a few things. First, thank you very much for the work session that we had a week or so ago. And these issues did come up at the work session, so I'm a little hesitant to this is a highly technical issue, and I see there's a couple of missing people this evening, but I guess with your permission, they have the letter. If there's questions through counsel, they can always address me. One of the things I wanted to bring to your attention is the standard for economic rental projects. And this is fairly late-breaking news at the Housing Appeals Committee, so I don't think any of the more recent projects that you've had have been subject to this rule. The Housing Appeals Committee seems intent upon drawing a bright line. They don't want to look at every project in the abstract. I'm sorry. They don't want to look at projects in the abstract. They want to define a clear-cut line, and if it's above the line, it's economic, and you're free to impose conditions, including a reduction of density, which we discussed at the work session a week ago. But if it's below the line, then anything that you do that imposes further costs is generally going to be frowned upon by the Housing Appeals Committee. So the current benchmark for a rental project based on return on total costs is the 10-year Treasury note, which today it crossed the 3% threshold for the first time, I think, since Lehman Brothers, and 450 basis points. That means that the return on total costs has to be 7.5%. That's the benchmark established by the HAC. If it's less than 7.5%, then the project is presumptively uneconomic. Now, I have to tell you, in doing work on both sides, your side of the bench and my side, in the last 10 years, I don't think I've seen any project come in at 7.5%, let alone at the benchmark. And the benchmark, as recently as 6 months ago, was down around 6.5%. This project applied for a project eligibility letter to Mass Housing with a benchmark that Stephen Zief has calculated at 5.57%. That's well below the 7.5% of today's benchmark. But the Housing Appeals Committee, in its wisdom, has fashioned a rule that if you're willing to apply for a lesser, with a lesser baseline, in this case 5.57%, and there are a number of reasons why you would do that, then that will become your benchmark. So the 7.5% goes away, and Mr. Zief's benchmark is 5.57%. But the same basic standard applies. If you begin to impose conditions that reduce the benchmark for this project from 5.57% downward, the test is pretty simple. Does the regional need for the housing outweigh the local concerns that have driven you to reduce the benchmark? Now, in this case, we've talked about a possible reduction in density, and frankly, if we lose units, that benchmark, the baseline that's been established here is going to go south in a hurry because there's massive construction costs, hard costs, and soft costs, for that matter, that are associated with the project. So we're sure that we can defend our position at 5.57%. None of us want to go to the Housing Appeals Committee, and I would urge the board to factor that in to its decision making when the time comes to prepare the comprehensive permit. That brings me to I'm happy to answer any questions about that. That brings me, go ahead.
I do have one. Of course I'm going to have one. In calculating the numbers, you're basing the numbers on certain criterias of cost of construction, land acquisition,
Yeah.
and proposed economic income. And those basis points, can you give us some clarity on, what type of income you're talking about as far as the 3 bedrooms are concerned? What rate structure you're utilizing? And how do you know that that rate structure is even going to be to market?
Well, I think in putting the project eligibility letter application to Mass Housing, Mr. Zief made assumptions about those numbers, and I'm sure that he looked at comps in trying to figure out what his market rate rents would be, given the market here. The affordable rents are predicted by formula, so there's no wiggle room there.
Right.
Stephen, do you want to talk about the numbers that you came up with for the 1s, 2s, and 3s?
If you would, Stephen, because I want to get some clarity, because for your benefit as well as ours. So, for instance, what is your 1 bedroom? What would you be charging for your 1 bedroom? And I understand rates go up as time goes on, as costs go on, as taxes go up. So, just for an example, what did you calculate approximately on the 1 bedroom?
We have the 1 bedroom, the market rate 1 bedroom at $1622.
22? 1622?
Yes, sir.
Was that a fraction you were dealing with?
Typically, I've had the pleasure of doing this long enough. I kind of write a formula, and I have ups and downs, and so the numbers come out as you hear them here.
And a 2 bedroom?
2 bedroom, 2489.
And the 3 bedroom is affordable.
Well, you're obligated to build 10% 3 bedrooms.
Right.
In my interpretation, that means 25% of those should be 3s, and the other 75 should be market rate.
Right. So you've got a number based on an average.
Well, yes, I have a number. No, as Mark said a moment ago, the affordable values I can give you, they're separate. They're dictated, and they're in the PEL.
Okay.
And I can walk you through those. The 3 bedroom market rate unit we're carrying at 2821.
2821. Okay. Right. And the affordable component of that?
I'll go down the list. We actually have a studio.
I'm sorry. I forgot to ask about the studio.
Right. We actually, in our model, we actually created studios and 1s with dens and 2s with dens. So we have a whole range of product type is the desire.
But that could change if you tighten up the building.
Again, this is
the model you're using.
This is the model, and until you put the building together, you really don't know what you have. But on the affordable front, the studio is $1,094. The 1 bedroom is $1,172. The 2 bedroom is $1,373, and the 3 bedroom is $1,573.
Okay.
And for what it's worth, we actually, the project eligibility application actually caused us to submit a market study with it. And so that
was going to be my next question.
Right. So we submitted that with the PEL, and I guess that was met with okay, nothing worse. And we have since continue to take a look at the market and try and figure out what's going on as everybody else.
In those studies, do you do an adjustment based on a trend of ups and downs?
I typically avoid trending my pro formas.
Okay.
I think a lot of people do that, and they mislead themselves in doing so, because what percentage do you put in for income? What percentage do you put in for expenses? What percentage, so you've got 12 different escalation clauses in there.
Right. But when we have a crash, everything goes down.
Of course.
2 bedroom, 2489, that's up there.
I don't think that's up there when you look at it around us at the more qualitative
Mark
product.
wants to say something.
I wouldn't disagree with you, Mr. Chairman, but if he gets 22, his return on total cost goes down from 5.57%.
I understand.
Right. So those are.
I know you stepped right in to help that situation.
Those are aggressive numbers. I don't disagree with you, given the market. But I think that in that context, it's likely that the 5.57 is hopeful.
But that's why when you're running and you're talking about the 5.57 and the cost of construction today, how this is even feasible.
I believe it's feasible because there's enough of a demand in the marketplace for whether you want to call it workforce housing or move down housing or any of the other things that this product can be good for. There's a significant demand. My big concern is interest rates and what their effect will be on, because people look at these typically, and as Mark said a few minutes ago, people look at these typically as a return on cost formula. And you know, the guys on Wall Street would do a jig when they hear a 7.5% on an affordable housing deal. They think that's a great return.
Okay. How are you doing on the water?
We have actually, we got a note from David Condrey a couple weeks ago now. David wrote me a note and said, you know, in thinking about it, I think maybe you were right. We should all try to work together more. And could you help to coordinate that? And we've since reached out and we've spoken to Gutierrez, and we've spoken to the folks at Labasar. Did I say that right? Yes. Okay, thank you. And, you know, I think people are thinking about whether it's worth trying to work together or not, but I'm hoping to encourage that. I think it would be best for everybody concerned.
So there's probably 4 of you.
I would actually propose that it should become a water bank, and everybody that requires new service should
A water band?
Water bank.
Oh, bank. Okay.
Yeah, almost like a
I'd like to open up a bank myself and put water in it.
Let me tell you, there'll be a point in time where it's not a laughing matter that water's more important than anything else.
True.
Based on these rates, you think you'll have any problem? I'm talking on the normal rate, not the housing part of it. Any problem filling this complex?
This project is going to be challenging. You can't see the product from the street. We've got great drive-by. We're in a nice area of strong population and demographics. So I think if we do a decent job, I think we should do well. But
So you think you can fill it?
we do. I do.
Obviously, at 5.7, you need to fill it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to. Now, as you just mentioned, I'm only bringing this subject up because you mentioned that you should work together with the other complexes that are trying to come to town regarding the water. Will their rates be similar to your rates? Are you guys going to be competitive?
I think that's the beauty to the residential marketplace, is it's so transparent, and there's, I think the market is dictated by the consumer's behavior, and people who like their project better will enhance the value of that project, and maybe they'll get a little bit more, and other projects that don't do as well will have to lower their prices. I mean, it's qualitative and it's quantitative.
I know I'm asking futuristic questions. I know that. And the market could go, God knows where it's going right now. But, you know, I just want to try to get, I'm assuming you can fulfill this, or you wouldn't be taking such a risk here. But I just want to feel as though at 300 units, they're going to be totally full. You're going to be keeping up your portion of the bargain of maintenance, et cetera, and not all of a sudden be down to 3-point-something% or 4%, and we end up having a situation where it's not to the standard that we approved. You see what I'm getting at?
I hear exactly what you're getting at.
So I know I'm asking you to predict the future, but you've been in the business a long time, and you know which way it's going to go, economy-wise, bad, economy-wise, good.
I know that people, it's a difficult job to create an environment that people will appreciate and pay more for. And that's what I hear your concerns to be. And my argument is that we're going to build a product that's on par with a better product in the area, and I think we'll get the numbers we're describing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to cover?
Did want to talk a little bit about front sign,
I'm sorry, about what?
about the front sign.
Okay.
And obviously it's subject to, oh, here it is, right beside me. How do I do do we know how to plug this in?
You got it on?
Yeah.
Put the power button on the camera itself, up front here, on top.
Oh, yes. Yeah, hold on. Combine presentation. It's up there.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, we're gonna get these lights off.
All right, so which switch was that?
That's better though. I think it warmed up.
Now, is the control, how do you control this? This? I don't have a red pointer, I'm sorry. Actually, you know what, that's ingenious. So, you'll recall, let me see if I can do this, Mr. Chairman. Mine is fuzzy compared to yours. So this is the front entrance as originally proposed, and as you know, we're waiting on Mass DOT's deliberations of the issue. My folks at VHB were speaking with them as late as Monday about this, and they need to study it a little further. But anyways, assuming, for sake of discussion, we're just going to look at this for a second. Daniel Feeney and I didn't spend a lot of time discussing landscaping as I look at this. When he first went to work on the project, it was one of those things that, in fairness, you hope you get to that point to really do it. But I look at this as opportunities, and I think as we go along through this, one of the things that I've expressed to Mark is the desire to have some flexibility and obviously keep you abreast of it. But I think there's an opportunity here when I look at this sort of layout and I go, do I want to see an alley of trees? Or do I want to see maybe, wrong way, areas of naturalized rubble walls and maybe post fence and clusters of trees? I don't know yet, but I just wanted to say to you that not off the radar. So these are two approaches to a front entrance sign, and they're both for significantly larger projects. So I understand the need to be spare and not go over the top, but this sign is actually very significant. It's about 6.5, 7 feet across and about 3.5, 4 feet high. So it's on a big arm. This is obviously what some people will call a wing wall, and this is laid into landscaping. And I think one of the things we'd like to do is make sure that we have our bases covered with you on your sign bylaw. So we'll need to just make sure if we have any questions on the, Daniel and I were talking about a few minutes ago, you didn't think from a square footage we have an issue. No. So anyways, I think that's it. All right.
Which brings me to the most sensitive issue, and that's the continued aspect of the entrance and exit. And let's talk about Mass DOT. Let's talk about what was brought to their attention on the 3 different concepts and where we stand with that. Because clearly this is a huge one. I'd like to have the town engineer involved in those discussions with Mass DOT on site, if that's possible. I don't want, and I'm not saying it's even happening, but clearly we want them to look at all three options and dissect them collectively. And those should be engineered by your company, not by the town engineer. And if it's not, then I'm going to suggest that any meeting with Mass DOT gets postponed so that it is. Because I think the aspect of the entrance of this and the safety of this is paramount. Can we comment on any of this? Where we are? I know we've talked about it.
Mr. Chairman, as late as Monday, VHB had a face-to-face with Mass DOT District 3 in Worcester, and Mass DOT indicated that it's their understanding that the town's preference is the split approach. I can't tell you, sir, that the split approach is our desire, especially because we think it could lead to increased traffic going through our site, which may not want to be there, which would have the ease of being able to do a easier turnaround with a single.
We had three concepts. We had moved it, and we had the split approach. And of course, that all be predicated on you obtaining an easement necessary if you needed it. So what about that other approach? Has that been brought
You mean
in front
the
of?
approach that it's approximately 160 feet downstream?
Yeah.
I can't tell you that we have a strong problem with that approach, all right? If that's the pleasure of the town, all right, we have some complexity, some issues that are of additional complexity related to wetlands, et cetera, but if that's the desire of the town and and you believe that to be something that important, then I would say to you, sir, we concede the point.
So you've discussed the split approach with Mass DOT and the original entrance, correct? The VHB
We
is
talked to all
addressing
three.
that?
VHB was faithful in presenting all three prospects.
Okay. While we have people here on that, does anybody want to be heard on the traffic entrance exit process? Did you want to see a picture of that? You have it, right? It's been seen before. I don't know if you had seen it. That's the split. Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure.
Hey, while you're doing that, Stephen, just to follow up on what the chairman was talking to you about, what was the result of the meetings with Mass DOT? Did they say they're going to make a decision on one or all of these anytime in the near future, and how are they going to approach it? So what was the result of the meeting that VHB had, as you said a few days ago?
I wasn't there and I didn't get a transcript, sir, but
Well, did they give you a report as to what
they
happened?
did, all right.
Okay.
I spoke to them and they reported, this was to, it's not my usual contact, his name escapes me for a second. He met with the folks at Mass DOT and went over it, and Mass DOT reported back to them that the town was expressing a desire for the split layout,
That's correct.
all right, and that they needed to study this more. I think what we're not hearing is they're feeling a little conflicted.
Well, did they give you a time frame at all?
Didn't give me a time frame.
Did they give your people a time frame? Anybody a time frame?
I'm not aware of a time frame being asked or answered. I'm sorry. Well, if what we're saying is that we believe that we can provide the same level of service, et cetera, with the offset, which was your consultant's original proposition, the split came from your town planner.
It doesn't really matter where it came from. It's a concept that members of the board, and I'm not speaking for the board here, are interested in. It has some merit, and what they are interested in is seeing if it is processed through DOT and see if a decision can be gotten out of DOT on that as a preferred alternative.
my
No matter
traffic,
who it came from.
Yeah, my traffic consultants at VHB believe that the split is the least desirable of the choices.
Then I guess there's some disagreement on that.
Exactly. All right. But you know what we offered initially was compliant. What we said we would consider was also compliant. The split has been brought to our attention. You'd like us to consider doing the split. We don't believe the split is a tried and true layout. We don't believe it serves everyone's best purpose.
Well, they were asking what?
Has it been it? Has the split been engineered to take a solid look at it?
To be fully engineered with a
Yeah.
layout?
Yeah.
I think you saw the essence of that, but I haven't seen a printed drawing that shows what's with a center line laid out.
And did the other one, the further entrance exit further down south, was that engineered or was that drafted?
All three of them were presented.
They
the
were
same.
presented, but they were concepts.
Yes.
They're only concepts. The question is, under Mass DOT, and my understanding of this was, this has been out there since 2016, and then addressed again in 2017. And this intersection at Whispering Pine and the entrance has been out there for close to 2 years. And it's not the ideal setup for, as far as the town of Milford's concerned. That's why we were looking and going down the road of the split on moving it further down. I am okay with the split, and I can live with the split. Someone's got to convince me if it's better from an engineering standpoint and a safety standpoint that it should be further down south and all encompassing in and out, then someone's got to show us that and give us the reasons why it's better than the split. Because clearly the current one, in conjunction with Whispering Pine, is not the ideal one that this board likes or that the town likes.
We appreciate the fact that Whispering Pine is the least desirable. That we can agree. I think we can.
We all
on.
agree that we all disagree on that one.
We can all agree that it seems to be the most controversial. So, you know, I really would like to draw this issue to closure, and I don't know what I can do.
That's what we've been trying to do.
Pardon?
That's what we've been trying to do.
Well, we've been trying to do it as well as a lot of other things. And we appreciate the fact that, among other things, you guys, this is supposed to be an among other things, being on the ZBA, and here it is, we're making it a full-time job, so we're very appreciative of your time and efforts here. I'm wondering if we should have VHB and your transportation engineers just get together, look at the three, and figure out within the political advocacy here of your board, which one works best and resolve it as such.
Well, there's
Because
not-
otherwise, let
Yeah,
me just finish.
go
Because
ahead.
I think one of the reasons why Mass DOT is not looking at this right now is because it's not a permit application. All right? And these guys are coming in and talking to them about things. And I understand that, but I know enough people in that part of government to know that they're trying to deal with the fire that's on their desk.
Well, then they got to stop. Maybe they need to be replaced.
But we're happy to have, your traffic people meet with our town engineer and our consultants if that works. But the issue is still the same, which is what's the position of DOT on these? Is any one of those two, really it's not the three, of those two better alternatives, I'll call them, a non-starter with DOT? They can be pushed, I believe, to let us know that, which gives this board obviously some very important information as to whether or not they want to put a condition on for one or the other, or an alternative condition. If we could get something out of DOT, not approving final plans, but approving, we should be talking to them and they should be reacting to the three concepts. Which ones, what's their preference? We all know what the relative preferences are here, but they're the ones who are going to have the final say on it.
That's right.
So again, happy to meet with, our engineer, meet with your folks if that's productive. Great, but they're not going to make that decision without knowing and we're not going to make that decision effectively until we know what DOT wants to do.
Appreciate that.
Steve, the reason that the split is not preferable to you folks is primarily cost?
No. it goes back to what I said earlier about having a presence on the street, and it's much easier and better and more efficient and more effective to create that presence on the street with a single entry. A split entry starts to, am I going to the service entrance or the help, or which entrance am I going in here? All right? It is only it's only 300 units, and it's on a large site, and I want to try and make it so it has the most.
That's the first time that I've heard the reason why you did not like the split entry. Now we're getting someplace. So it becomes it becomes not so much a marketing aspect of it, but a direction of presence for the facility, similar to what the pictures you've shown, especially the one with the stone facade in the front. And I get that. And if I need to go, myself, Jerry, any board members who want to go to Mass DOT with you, your engineers, our engineers, sit down at the round table and hammer out the causes, the pros and cons of the entrance, of what will work and what won't work, I'd be happy to condition it. And if that means going 150 feet down south with a combination of one entrance, then let's show that and let's proceed with that. I understand the reason now about your split. I'm concerned about the safety aspect of the entrance and exit, the busing, the stacking of kids coming out of that complex waiting for buses, whether we're going to provide parking for those parents that are going to leave those kids in front waiting for a bus. I'm not really getting into the public transportation aspect of the buses going by there at this point, but clearly our two choices are the split or the one further down is fine. I just don't like the one that you have on the table. I think that one there is going to create a death, personally.
When you say the one there, you mean
The
the
original,
one,
the original filing.
I understand.
And I'd be happy to suggest a condition for these other two, subject, if we had to make a choice or a decision, subject to the Mass DOT approval. But, you know, short of Mass DOT not cooperating, now it's irritating me. And I can't understand why we can't get them in a room for 1 hour and straighten this out. It's ridiculous. I think it's totally ridiculous.
Steve, any of your other projects have split entrances? Are they all single entrance?
Only in tight urban sites where you do not have the ability to come in through a single entrance. Everything else is all a single entrance, the desire to create a
More
sense of
dense populations?
No. Your question is, what's your position on single entrances? And my position on single entrances is that's my desire. That's what I want. I want control over that front entrance. I want to be able to say to people, we're here and we're doing things. So that's the thing, and that goes with every property. So that's the idea behind it.
I understand exactly what you're saying. I know what you want to do. I have a question regarding this. This is the one, the split.
That's
What is it?
Yeah, Mr. Duncan's.
That's Mr. Duncan's.
Larry Duncan's design.
What is the distance between if on a split, what is the distance between the entrance and the exit?
You mean if you go up and around and back?
No, from A to B on Route 16. What would this distance right here
I'm
be?
gonna guess it's about 150 feet because that's what the offset was. And I think this is pretty much a combination of the original and then moving it down 150 feet. A little more than 150. Is it, yeah, 16.
I think the one entrance was probably, I think, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong.
Go ahead. I'm trying to get this out of your eyes.
Because we had the concept for the southern main entrance. Remember that third concept? Do you have that?
Yeah, you have, I don't have it on me, but we had, yeah, so we had one that was opposite Whispering Pine, one that was down about 160 feet or so.
That one?
Yeah, and And now we've had a discussion of the split.
I think the question is, is it in the same spot?
Roughly, it's opposite Whispering Pine, right? Am I correct?
Split would have it opposite with straight pine.
Where's the other, where's the
You
other?
need to have enough distance, or we're gonna have conflict.
I agree.
Further down. Okay, so this is Whispering Pine, and here's the third one. So it's,
Right across from the trees.
it's 300,
There's a little scale.
There's a little scale, yeah.
no, I got my pen.
But if
No,
you
no,
shrunk it, it
Yeah,
does
there's-
shrink the
there's
scale.
scales.
Right, exactly, that's what I'm saying, that could,
Yeah,
No, that'll be accurate, because
yeah,
it shrinks as you.
yeah, that'll be, if your fingers are accurate, that'll be accurate.
140, 150 feet.
So just for the sake of not an argument, just throwing it out there as ideas, because you want a single entrance, obviously, for obvious reasons. A split, in my opinion, is safer. That's just my opinion, knowing that road, people turning in, people coming out, it'd make things a little easier. What would, if you're talking about 150 feet approximately here, this distance between A and B, what would be something satisfactory to everybody, and safety-wise on top of it, of a reduction of that distance of 150 feet? Would 75-foot distance between their work?
I think what you'd find is the transportation, just like we had a whole discussion about one of the cons to
Right.
the front end, to the entrance opposite the other street. And the fact is they had to be able to see for the effective speed of 44 miles an hour, which meant you needed to have, I don't know, it was a couple hundred, 360 feet or so, I think is what they required. So in this situation, for purposes of maneuvering, they'd say they do not want the driveways to be too close. And
Is there a standard of 150 feet? Is that the minimum?
Dan Feeney from Bales and Thomas. I'm not the traffic engineer, but in general, it's the exiting vehicles from the site would want to be 150 feet or more away from the exiting
entrance.
vehicles from Whispering Pine. So
Okay,
it's that's the offset you're trying to maintain. It's not really the distance between the exit and the entry to the site. It's the two exits, because that's going to be the conflicting turning movements.
So my question is a moot point.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Just thought I'd put it out there for, looking for some sort of alternative where everybody's happy on this.
Okay. So do you think we can probably reach out to Mass DOT, maybe coordinate something with Jerry and our town engineer and town planner? If necessary, I'll drive in and maybe have one or two of them drive in. If that will move things along quicker, I'd be happy to do that. I think you want to move this thing along just as fast, so I think maybe, usually if you put everybody around the round table, you can probably come out of there with an answer or a recommendation one way or another. We don't have to go back 2 or 3 more weeks going back and forth on something that we've been going back and forth on for like 2 years. That's what it feels like.
Can I ask one more question regarding this? If we go back, again, addressing the entrance, to one entrance exit, what if it was widened? Made it wider? I don't know what the actual single entrance width is. Why is that? What do you mean we're off that? But we're not off it. Well, it's just something I would think that making it wider might actually help. I don't know. I'm not a traffic engineer. I'm just asking the questions.
Yeah, I'm not sure it would help or necessarily hurt that much, because it's still, I mean, if you're talking about making it wider so there's more lanes of traffic coming out. No? Oh, Okay. No, so I know what you're saying now. Basically having a split but at the same location. So you could put an island in the middle of it. It's not 150 feet off, but it's somewhat separated. We can, I mean, I can raise that with VHB, if that provides some benefit. Yeah, that's something we can look at, or VHB can discuss with. Yeah.
I guess the reason I get concerned about that entrance, and it shows it, the 85 percentile speed at that intersection, and this is the 85 percentile, and it ranges in times from 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, 42 miles an hour to 48 miles an hour to 43 miles an hour to 46 miles an hour. That's the 85 percentile. The average speed ranges anywhere from 39 to 40 to, it's all in the high 3s and 4s. And it's interesting because when I took a look at a traffic count today on East Main Street prior where the former Stop and Shop Plaza was, they're pushing out demographics of 35,000 cars a day going on Route 16. Now, clearly, we know that's not right. So the actual traffic in front of this site per day is how many cars?
I don't recall the number.
Okay.
You came prepared, sir.
Because I can tell you that Mass DOT and other traffic reporting companies are pretty far off in the traffic counts by, in some cases, hundreds and thousands. So, we've got traffic reports from all over the place. We've got traffic speeds that are clearly in the high 30s, 40s, and in some cases 50s at certain times. So when you dump a lot of cars in that location, and whether it's 150 or at one time, coming out or going in at certain times, I don't want someone killed at this intersection. So that's the paramount aspect of the safety for me. And if we split this at some format, we're making it, I think, a little safer. If we can have a Whispering Pine right turn only coming out of that street, it makes it a tad safer. And that's really the, and I know we've been hopping about this entrance since we started. And we really do need to come together and make it palatable for you, for us, and for the community. So with that, you have a question, go ahead. And that's the other reason why I think a flashing light is also an important aspect to have there, and certainly I would bring that up in front of Mass DOT as well, since they clearly do not want, and they've rejected to put any lights at all there. Is there anything else we need to cover from your perspective with that particular condition? Mark? Yeah. You're done there? Okay. Anybody else on the traffic side of things? Any board members on traffic?
I just want to be clear in understanding what you're looking for from us. All right, you're looking for us to coordinate a meeting with Mass DOT and yourselves.
And even with the town engineer, if necessary. Yeah.
Well, when I say yourselves, I mean
our side.
Yeah, your side of the bench.
Absolutely.
All right. So that's one of the things. I guess one of the other questions is, could we ask VHB to concur on the point of the 3 choices with your consultant, BSC? Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we on? Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank the applicant and the zoning board for trying to come up with some compromise on the entrance exit to the particular site. in hearing the discussion here, I'm a little concerned because it seemed like the applicant said the town's preferred mode was the split entrance. I didn't realize the town had made that, although I understand the town planner came up with a scheme for a split entrance, but I didn't know that the town was recommending a split entrance. Right.
These are concepts that we're
Right.
trying to make things safer.
Okay, and to that point, hearing the discussion back and forth, one of the problems for both the applicant and the town is design by committee. I think that you've made an excellent point to get the engineers together with the state and work this out, because having just everybody shout out ideas is probably not going to work very well in anyone's
It hasn't.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, Mark. You're next.
If we're turning our attention to another matter, I'm going to hand out a sushi menu. I had the time to write it out. There's no wrong answers here. That's the beauty of it. These are the preferences that I typically see in a comprehensive permit, and I'm just handing them out to you to walk you through it. I want your recommendation to put into the draft that I've been sharing with your council. This is one of the...
For the benefit of the public, Mark, will you just itemize these so they understand? Please.
Under the comprehensive permit law, federal and state housing laws, more importantly, you are entitled to a preference for 70% of the affordable units, up to 70% of the affordable units. And typically, those preferences begin with Milford residents. And generally, there's a residency requirement of a year before you're officially recognized as a Milford resident. A second category, and you don't have to vote for all of these, would typically be parents and children of Milford residents, because if the family was stationed here and now the kids have gone off elsewhere, they may need to come home for caretaking purposes, or older parents may want to come back to see their grandchildren if they have another home somewhere else, something like that. The third is employees of the town, meaning municipal employees, teachers, policemen, firemen, DPW department. The fourth is employees in the town, so any bona fide Milford employer would have employees, and those employees would be eligible. And the last one is veterans. And that's pretty much the range of
It's about what I expected.
Yeah, that's the range of preferences that I've had experiences with recently. I just did a project for a nonprofit at the old Norwell police station. They're converting the building into all affordable units, and one of the strong feelings in the town there was they wanted veterans to get a preference. So the way this works is that there's an initial tenant selection process. There's a company that we will hire to do this. It's not a lottery. It's called a tenant selection. And it's people, if you're a Milford resident, you get a bean. If you're an employee of the town, you get another bean. If you're a vet, you get 3 beans. And when the lottery comes for the affordable units, it just ups your chances. Think the Celtics, think Tim Duncan.
Thank you. We also, while we're on the subject of talking about certain situations like this, we're talking about some of the conditions and throwing out a couple of those conditions. One of them being that all the units would count.
Yes.
Towards our 10%.
Correct.
And that's in perpetuity, not for 25 years. That's what we're recommending, and that's what we'd like.
Correct.
So that when this particular aspect, like what's happened in the past, the 3 or 4 apartment complexes that went offline after 25 years is really the reason why we now have 3 projects in front of us. So going forward, we're recommending in the decision that, of course, all 300 of these would count towards the 10%, and we will be conditioning that nothing additional can be built on the site, with the exception, I think Steve talked about it, maybe some passive recreation. If you've got something that you want to think about to have in that and what you consider passive recreation, we'd like to see those examples.
Okay.
That would be helpful. We certainly don't want, another building being built further down the road because you've got a 2-acre piece of dry that you can try and get at. Anything else you have?
I just want to point out that in the draft comprehensive permit that I've been sharing with council, in my respect for the town, I put in provisions that guard the town after mass housing disappears under the regulatory agreement,
Right.
which is typically in 30 years. So there's a local regulatory agreement that would kick in at that point. We call it a springing regulatory agreement. Right. And that would supervise the project for as long as those buildings remain standing, which is perpetuity for all purposes.
And we didn't really discuss a ton concerning the last landscaping, buffers of fencing. Do you want to kind of briefly give us an overview on what you're planning or what you think you're planning, or you haven't got there yet?
Well, typically landscaping is a condition in the comp permit that says prior to the issuance of any final approvals, we're going to get a landscaping plan subject to ZBA approval before you go forward. But I think what we can do at this point is show typical sections.
Yeah, but we don't, I'm concerned about the approval of that and the mechanism of that in the event someone doesn't care for the type of trees you're putting in, the life of those trees, that type of stuff.
Let me be clear. At this stage, because the comp permit is not a sure thing and because we're trying to keep expenses down in the permitting process, we would give you sections of typical landscaping. But prior to you giving us certificates of occupancy, we would give you a final landscaping plan. It would be after the close of the hearing, subject to your approval, and you're going to get what you want.
Okay. Talk to me about privacy fencing and if you're planning on doing that. And this is strictly to, if you drive through some of our apartment complexes, some of them have fences around them, and what it's doing, it helps collect the driven wind of cups and papers, and so the place doesn't look disastrous. So I'd like to see how you're going to handle that.
So we haven't proposed any at this point. Where the development is closest to the abutters is actually at the entry road. So if the entry road does shift over, that will provide a bigger buffer. So as you come in to the site, the homes on the, I guess it's the western side of Wildwood Drive, back up to the property, and those would be near the entrance. Where the buildings are located are a pretty good distance from any of the property lines.
Yeah, well, the Wildwood Road side and some of the East Main Street side, depending on where, if that other entrance is utilized, from a buffer standpoint or others kind of trapping through and cutting through from Wildwood to the back of the site, trying to get somewhere, you know, maybe if you would consider a gradual transition of bordering fence line in some of those areas over time. So it doesn't, if you're saying no, just say no. Okay. Well, you're shaking your head. You just get up and say yes or no, and I'm a big boy, and then I'll get your answer.
I appreciate your concerns, Mr. Chairman. We really need to put the site together and see how it works. And if we find ourselves with a security problem or a trespassing problem, then we'll figure out a good way to fix that too.
Okay.
But I don't.
I'll take your comment, but all right.
Okay.
I'll take your comment, but that's why I wanted to bring it up now. Okay. Anything else you want to bring up prior?
No, thank you.
Okay. Anybody from the audience have anything they want to comment on? Please feel free to come on up. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Kristen Nogler. I actually have a couple questions first. Sure. Exactly how many 1-bedrooms and 3-bedrooms were you planning on having in the complex? Thank you.
So this is off the pro forma that was submitted to the Mass Housing for the project eligibility letter. So we have, you were interested in what type?
1 and 3.
1 and 3. So we have, make sure I get this right. You have to add these up, but you get 8 1-bedrooms that are affordable, 22 1-bedrooms that are market rate. So that makes 30. Again, this is a model. this is as it was asked previously by the chair, is this exactly? 3 bedrooms, we've got 8 affordable and 22 market rate.
Thank you. I guess my concern is, and I'm going by experience of what I've been through in the last couple of years before I finally settled down, Milford is greatly lacking in 3-bedroom apartments. All the complexes we have are mostly 2 bedrooms, and it seems like they throw in a couple 1 and 3 bedrooms, not nearly enough. And a lot of people are forced to live in a 2-bedroom and cramp when they shouldn't. So that's one concern, is if there's any way to try and get more 3 bedrooms in, because you don't even have to have a lot of kids, just 1 boy and 1 girl, and you need a 3-bedroom, and it's greatly lacking in Milford. My other concern is that there are so many 2-bedroom apartments in all the complexes we have. And with the prices that he was giving off, my concern is you're making it more attractive for like places like Section 8 and Smock, who rents out like 20 apartments in one of the complexes and 20 in another one to use as homeless shelter apartments. I think at that prices, they're going to be kind of hard for regular, average working families and low-class family to afford, and you're kind of pushing it in that direction to people that can afford it, meeting places like Smock or Section 8. Is there any chance in just lowering it? I mean, I know it's a struggle for working people. I mean, you got both parents working, that's a lot of money, and it is a little bit higher than the complexes we have now that are actually, they consider themselves luxury apartments, and they're a little bit lower than that. So I'm just wondering about the prices. Is that like set in stone? Is there any negotiation? It's very expensive. It really is. And
The cost of construction far exceeds the aspects of what they're doing, and that's why they're coming in with the affordable component to help that along. That affordable component is trying to, and that is an income-driven apartment.
Okay.
So, and it's geared towards that income level where they can't afford the higher rent. So your normal 3-bedroom, I think he indicated, would have been $2,800, and the affordable one came down to $1,573 or something. That what it was. So that's a huge reduction from market rate. So a 3-bedroom, brand spanking new, under the affordable component, of which Mr. Zales just spoke of, is $1,573 a month. That's pretty cheap for a 3-bedroom, brand new. So that's happening on this complex. There's other complexes coming in front of the zoning board with the same process of 272 units and 164 or 46. So the affordable components, that's the reason why they're eligible to build them. So hopefully that's answered your question to the best of the ability we can at this point.
Just one more. I
Sure.
don't know if you were even aware that Smock had done that it rents out all those apartments. Is there anything that can be put in place to protect from that, where take a company coming in and renting out so many apartments?
You mean similar like to an Airbnb?
I don't really know how it would be defined, because it's a shelter. But what it is Smock, what they did was the Groves. 20 of those apartments, they rent out. No, I can't rent them, you can't rent them. They're specifically for shelter purposes.
Right.
They do it at Pheasant Run. They have some on Lincoln Street too. So they took like 50 apartments off the market in Milford alone for that. Could there be anything put in place to protect against that?
Mark will be able to answer that.
There is something in place already. The regulatory, we have to sign a regulatory agreement with the state. And the regulatory agreement has a clause that the units will be the principal residence or domicile of every occupant. Now, what that means short term, I'll give you myself as an example. I remodeled my house. I had no place to go. I went to an affordable housing complex in Concord to a market rate unit, and I signed a short-term lease because I had no other place to live. And that's allowed, but you can't treat it like it's a hotel, and you can't treat it like it's a shelter, because there's, in every regulatory agreement, it's a mandatory clause, principal residence or domicile. No, I just
Thank you for bringing that up. We appreciate it.
I just litigated a case for the town of Falmouth, and one of the applicant originally came in for a hotel, and the Cape Cod Commission denied it. as a development of regional impact too big for downtown. So he flipped it to a 40B, and the town was worried that he was going to rent 3 weeks in the summer to you if you wanted, you know, a place in downtown Falmouth, which is pretty attractive. So I had him on the witness stand with that clause of the regulatory agreement and got him to concede that he couldn't do that. So.
Thanks for clearing that up. That was an important, and that's good information as well, because that clearly is affecting the residents of Milford if these group type of facilities are tying up apartment complexes and a portion of those. That's a lot. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Anyone else have anything? Yes, ma'am. Come on up. They can't build it if they don't have water.
Well, how will that be addressed and how will that be decided? I live on the other side of town, and whenever there's an issue, we're the last section that gets corrected. And it's been a problem since 2009 when we had the boil water order. So I'd like to have an understanding of how this is going to affect me as a consumer and a resident and my water rates and my water consumption. Because every single year we have conservation where we're stage 3, stage 4, you can't water your lawns, everything's dying. And now you have 3 different complexes coming in.
Yeah, a couple of things if I can respond to that. I just spent 2 days before the DPU with the water company on their rate case, and many things were discussed, including their problems in terms of supply. All of these 3 projects, there's this one with 300 units, there's another one that's behind it with 272 units, another one with about 160 units. Each of those, before they do any construction, have to have a source of water. If you go online on the town's website right now, you'll see the response of the Milford Water Company and their consulting engineers in some detail as to their position on whether or not they can address the water needs that would be generated by these projects. And what they're saying is the way they are right now and with their sources of supply at this moment, they can't satisfy those needs. So in essence, before these developers can develop their property and build, they've got to work with the water company and resolve that problem of supply. So thus, in essence, increase the amount of supply so that additional supply is available for them. That's not going to solve any problems that happen periodically because of drought or because of, but the essence of it is that they can't tie in to the Milford water system until additional supply has been developed that'll meet their needs, and hopefully more than that. So, as you heard, well, you may or may not have heard Mr. Zife say in the beginning, he's trying to work with some of these other developers to work with the water company to see if that can be done. But again, not to speak for the board, but I would expect there's going to be a condition on all of these projects that are coming in that before they can construct and obviously and occupy, they have to have an approved source of water in place. Yeah, that's simple. They're going to have it.
By the way, some of the reason we're having the water issue, we do have some wells that are down and have been down. 1 or 2 of them anyways. Yeah, the Golfy Brook wells have been down, and that well is totally offline, and whether the developer or the other developers are working with the water company to get that well back up and running, and if that's going to satisfy the water need, that's what's been kind of going on in the background. But there's more than one that's down. Okay? Anybody else? With that, before I close the hearing, any board members have anything they'd like?
We should arrive at another date.
Yeah.
23rd, but you got a problem?
Yeah, I may have a conflict with that one. I could probably go the following day, maybe. I hate not to be here, of course.
I can't.
How about the 20? Oh, wait a minute. '28th, Monday, Tuesday?
Monday's Memorial Day. Tuesday I'm in Savoy. Does anybody know where Savoy is? No, it's under North Adams.
Wednesday the 30th, which is the following Wednesday.
That would work.
That work?
Would work for you, Stephen?
Do we have any other?
Okay.
That's about our deadline.
Yeah, that's about the deadline.
Yeah. When is the deadline? Do you know?
Isn't it like June 4th or 6th?
I think it was the 6th. June.
6th,
Right. Yeah, so we'll do May 30th?
Thank you.
That's great.
In the interim, Mark and I talked today, we'll probably try to have another work session, and also in the interim, as you've heard Attorney Bobrowski say, we've exchanged drafts of conditions. He sent me a very good selection of conditions that he was suggesting. I made some suggestions for changes. We're going to do a little bit more of that. And when we get through something that we generally agree upon, we're going to circulate that, obviously, to the board members so that you can take a look at it.
Great.
And then ultimately, at that last meeting, focus on, presuming that there's going to be an approval with substantial conditions, focus on the conditions that may still be left in dispute and hopefully resolve those that night so a decision can be gotten out in pretty short order. So there'll be at least those exchanges going on, a work session with various developers' representatives in the towns. Chairman usually attends, and of course we'll keep the board updated on all that.
Hopeful to do a work session the week of the 7th. I have a trial the week before, and I'm gone the week after, so that if we could find a date to do that, I'll work with council to
Week of the
identify
7th?
that.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, Steve, you'll get to us concerning Mass OD, and we can maybe get that rolling. That's great. All right. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we thank you for showing up tonight and joining us. Please remember that everything gets posted to the Town of Milford's website. If there is any updates, we try to get everything over there as soon as possible. Okay? With that, everyone have a wonderful evening and enjoy your night. Thank you.